Hello, everyone. This is Kripa Anand, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are discussing the evolving front line of financial security. In 2026, the fraud landscape has shifted. Scammers are no longer just sending generic emails, they are leveraging AI and breaking news to create highly convincing, timely attacks that target our daily anxieties. Joining us today is David Chin, the leader of fraud strategy at Interac. With over 15 years of experience across fraud operations, anti money laundering, and strategy, David leads the charge in protecting Interac's massive ecosystem, which Canadians rely on over 20 million times a day. He is here to break down the latest 2026 fraud trends and share how we can protect our digital trust. So, before further ado, let's welcome this special guest. David, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Now, David, your latest Interact survey highlights a startling trend. Fraud attempts are now being tied to directly real world events like tariffs and cost of living pressures. So let's start by understanding what is driving the rise in news based scams specifically.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question and timely as well. Like the news is a scary place these days. And,
Mhm.
we live in the age of doom scrolling, which wasn't much of a problem 5 or 6 years ago. And fraudsters are incredibly agile and opportunistic. So, there's no longer just sending generic phishing emails and, they're actively tracking major news cycles and economic pressures like tariffs and
Mhm.
trade rules and like you said, the rising cost of living, and they're integrating these into their scams. And so this year alone, many Canadians have noticed, as our surveys has indicated, tariff-related scams, references to cost of living pressures, overdue bill notices, offers for government assistance and
Mhm.
loans, and then pervasive as always, investment opportunities are always there. So what this shows us is that fraudsters are exploiting existing concerns and daily realities, which is not only making scams more relevant and more convincing, they are much more effective and harder to detect.
No, definitely. Because when fraud mirrors our actual news feed, it bypasses our natural skepticism and makes even the most vigilant person vulnerable to a well-timed message. So thank you for highlighting that. Now you also mentioned AI, right? And this conversation is
Mhm.
incomplete without it. With every day, new technology coming up, the bad guys also have the same access to the same technology, right? So from a layman's perspective, please go ahead and explain to our audience that how is artificial intelligence making scams harder to detect?
Yeah, no, AI is having a huge impact on
Yeah.
how much more convincing scams are getting. The scams used to be a lot easier to spot, with spelling and grammar mistakes, and
Yeah.
this is no longer the case. And not only can the language be perfect, scams nowadays can be much more personalized and contextually relevant due to the advances in AI and the amount of data that we share about ourselves online. We have website clones that are becoming more realistic. And, social engineering scripts are becoming more sophisticated and accessible.
Mhm.
Deep fake videos and audio are getting more and more convincing. I mean, if you
Yeah.
just look at the evolution of the Will Smith eating spaghetti videos, has become an entertaining, if not frightening, way to benchmark how quickly and significantly AI improves over time. So
Mhm.
it's these advances in technology that make it harder and harder to discern between what's real and what's fake.
No, definitely, the fact that long-standing cues, like you mentioned, poor formatting, spelling mistakes, they are no longer dependable. Means we have to move towards more robust behavioral-based detection, right? And just being
Mhm.
um, more active and aware all the time. Uh, Now let's look at the emotional impact of all the things that we talked about, the growing trust gap as well, because
Mhm.
trust is the thing that is getting the most compromised or sacrificed in this entire conversation. So again, from your perspective, please go ahead and explain why is fraud impacting trust in the digital economy.
Yeah, for sure. When people can no longer distinguish between genuine and fraudulent communications, it creates a
Hmm.
lot of anxiety and distrust, like you said. I think our survey said that, 2/3 of Canadians have told us that since the traditional warning signs of, like the spelling mistakes and things like that, they're no longer dependable. They're much more hesitant to open legitimate emails, and they're questioning calls from their bank and even delaying important transactions. And this confusion is making it challenging for services and clients to communicate and conduct everyday transactions because it's so hard to tell the difference between reality and what's fake.
Hmm.
On the other side, as a victim, there's also severe, fallout from that because these scams are so realistic. Victims are feeling like they should have known better, or even when the deception was highly sophisticated. Um, you know, Canadians say they regret for not having done more to protect
Yeah.
themselves, and so whether you're trying to interact legitimately or whether you've been a victim of a scam, the emotional toll is huge.
No, definitely. And building on what you said, David, here's a special message for all of our listeners, specifically to all the Canadians watching. In
Mhm.
2026, fraud doesn't discriminate. Whether you are a tech savvy entrepreneur or a first time user, the AI driven scams today are designed to fool anyone by exploiting current trade uncertainties and inflation. Interact's research shows that nearly 80% of you feel is, AI making these scams harder to spot. So don't let, fear pull you out of the digital economy. Awareness is your best defense. If a message about custom fees or overdue bills feels urgent, stop and verify through an official channel. Protecting your money starts with protecting your trust. And coming back to you now, David, with what you said, from the victim's perspective as well, when the fear of being scammed, causes people to retreat from unfamiliar retailers or cross border trade, it impacts the entire growth of our digital ecosystem. Now, with that said, I'd love to talk about how Interac is, creating a defense wall with this. So, go ahead and educate our audience about how is Interac working with partners to fight fraud.
Yeah, absolutely. And at Interact, we like to say we're enabling digital prosperity for Canadians, and we want Canadians to be able to feel secure when they use trusted payments like e-transfer and debit.
Yeah.
And the key to that is remaining vigilant from the customer side. But for what Interact is doing, we know that fraud isn't a problem that any single entity can solve in isolation. And
Yeah.
so we're actively collaborating with our partners to share critical intelligence to strengthen our fraud prevention measures at every touch point and leverage our unique system-wide view for fraud patterns. And that means working with the banks and working with telecom providers to share that intelligence so that we can improve the trust that Canadians have in these services.
No, definitely. I think combining a system-wide view of, payment flows with real-time collaboration between 300 financial institutions, I think it's the only way to stay ahead of organized fraud. And also, with that, building on that, please touch upon the combination of AI and human that, Interact is also dealing with, because right now, this is where the major struggle is happening. We don't know how to balance the two. So I'd love to understand your perspective on that as well. How does Interact combine AI and human expertise to detect fraud?
Yeah, as you said, AI makes a lot of things possible, whether it's for good purposes or for bad purposes.
Yeah.
And so, how we use AI in combination with our human expertise is we're able to detect patterns faster, and we're able to make decisions quicker. We're able to pull in a lot more information and synthesize it to make more accurate decisions, so that
Hmm.
we can help Canadians make that decision, an informed decision of whether to proceed with, a transaction or whether or not to trust somebody that they're talking to. And that involves, again, going back to the collaboration that we have with our partners. Together, we can stitch together a much more um, uh, accurate view of reality for consumers, as opposed to where fraudsters like to isolate their victims um, and take advantage of stress that way.
Very well articulated. Using the AI part to handle the massive volume of data while humans investigate, the complex cases. It ensures that balanced, high integrity defense for every transaction is taking place. I'm loving this conversation, David, and definitely I'd love for you to be back, hopefully, for an in person episode that we do with you the next. But for now, before we let you go, if there's one final piece of advice that you have for our listeners today, what should people do when they receive a suspicious, urgent message? What's your golden advice for that?
Yeah, that's great. I think you touched on a little bit before, but we need to shift our focus beyond looking just for spelling mistakes and instead really scrutinize the context and the source of the communication.
Mm-hmm.
Always question, especially unsolicited messages, especially those demanding urgent action or immediate action, especially when it comes to moving large sums of money or sharing personal information. And
Mm-hmm.
really the crucial step is to independently verify anything by contacting either the organization directly, check with your friends, never use the phone numbers or links that are provided in this message. Those things are always going to be your best defenses.
Indeed, a great reminder that taking a breath and verifying the source is the most powerful tool that we have. David, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
All right, that was David Chin from Interac Corp, a masterclass in how AI is reshaping the fraud landscape and why coordinated action is the key to maintaining our digital confidence in 2026. To all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more such resources. To learn more about how we are supporting the ecosystem, please visit the Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smbfoundation.ca. And lastly, a very special thank you to our partners, UPS and ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering SMBs across Canada. I'll see you all in the next episode. Kripa Anand signing off.